Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Betsy Brick. I'm the Development Director of Early Music Seattle, and I'm so happy to be your host for a new virtual series we are starting tonight called Creative Conversations, where we talk to early music artists who are part of our 2021 season, go behind the scenes with them. And so I'm delighted tonight to have violinist and early music powerhouse, Rachel Barton Pine, with us. Rachel is a leading interpreter of the great classical masterworks who thrills audiences with her dazzling technique, lustrous tone, and emotional honesty. With an infectious joy in music making and a passion for connecting historical research to performance, she transforms audiences' experiences of classical music. She has appeared as a soloist with many of the world's most prestigious ensembles, including the Chicago and Vienna Symphonies, Philadelphia Orchestra, Royal Philharmonic, and Camerata Salzburg. Welcome, Rachel. It is so great to have you with us.
Great to be here. In fact, it's so funny because I feel like I've been going to Seattle virtually like multiple times a week for the last couple of months because as sad as everything has been with, quarantine and all the concerts getting canceled and everything, one of the beautiful silver linings has been that because a lot of educational things have gone online, my daughter has been able to participate in many classes from the Seattle Historical Arts for Kids.
Oh, wow.
It's a unique program in the country, and I've always felt so sad that here in Chicago we're nowhere near Seattle and could never participate, and now all of a sudden we're getting to do like all the classes, and it's just been brilliant.
Oh, that's wonderful. How great.
So Seattle's been on our minds continually.
Oh, well, that's lovely to hear. We love that. So before we begin, for those of you joining us live tonight, we are going to have time for questions at the end of our interview. So you can feel free to type those in the Q&A box that you see at the bottom of your screen. And we will get to those a little bit later in our program tonight. So to kick things off, Rachel, for those in our audience who are not familiar with early music, would you take a moment to give us a definition of it, your definition of it, and highlight some of the differences between it and classical music? And I believe you have quite a collection of early music instruments that you would love to share with us that I bet could demonstrate this really well.
Absolutely. So, gosh, I was a board member of Early Music America for a number of years, so I should have the official definition memorized, but it's not coming into my brain right now.
No pressure. No pressure.
It's basically, a lot of people consider it early music to be a set of repertoire, going from way back, even before the medieval, all the way up to definitely the classical period, and sometimes even into the Romantic period. But it's really also an approach to performance practice. So in other words, you don't just take your violin and do the same vibrato and the same kind of shifts and use the same kind of bow for Bach as you would for Brahms. If you're going to do something earlier, you might use earlier equipment, earlier approaches to articulation and tempi and phrasing and ornamentation, all those little notes that you get to add. And all of this, not for authenticity for its own sake, because that's a little bit of an empty argument, but really to bring the music more beautifully to life and to really make it more fun and creative for the performer to get to speak in all of these different languages. So I think those kind of principles to approaching your interpretation can be used for almost anything. When my heavy metal band, which primarily played more contemporary type of thrash mixed with doom metal, was covering a Black Sabbath song, we were talking about, okay, Black Sabbath would have had this kind of a guitar and this kind of an amp and would have gotten this kind of a sound, and how can we, make sure that we have the right tempos and the right type of vocals, and those are, I really felt like our conversations were no different than when I've been playing with a Renaissance violin band. And so, period performance practice is period performance practice, wherever you might find it.
Yeah. So were there some early music instruments you'd like to
Yes.
What is from your collection?
My daughter has generously agreed to help me help carry them all back and forth. Sylvia, are you available?
Oh, great.
Okay, so here comes the first one. This is a Rebek. If you could bring me my Rebek. This is Sylvia. She's 8, and she's also
Hello, Sylvia.
And the Rebek is one of the ancestors of the violin. Basically, this instrument came from the Middle Eastern rebab, which was kind of a instrument that you would maybe strike or pluck. And then somewhere about a millennium ago, people got the idea to take a curved piece of yew wood and draw it across the strings and make them sing. And this is actually not a medieval bow. It's more of a Renaissance bow, but it is made out of yew. A medieval bow would have an even sharper arc. And now this doesn't look anything like the construction of a violin. It's kind of a half gourd shape with a flat top and 3 strings. But the innovation is that the strings were tuned in fifths to allow for more easy playing of melodies. And then the body of the vihuela, which turned into the Renaissance lyre de braccio, also referred to as the Renaissance fiddle, the body of the lyre de braccio and the tuning in fifths of the Rebek ultimately merged to become the violin, which I'll talk about a bit more in a minute. And of course, that's the very Reader's Digest condensed version. But the Rebeks, simple as they are, still have a particular voice that is very, very fun. And like many medieval instruments, they sound better with friends. They're not necessarily made for a cappella playing. And Sylvia has been taking a medieval improv class from his Seattle Historical Arts for Kids and just got a Rebek of her own. So we're going to jam for you for a couple of minutes so you can hear what a Rebek sounds like. Get over here, Sylvia.
Oh, lovely.
So we always have to pick our key and our mode. Let's see, are you on camera? Where are you best on camera? Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Now we can see you.
Yep. Okay, we hold them on the arm. Just because that's where they work best. Okay, first let's hold them up. Okay, so there's no standardization. You can see our Rebeks a little bit different scrolls, but they have the same body shape. Yep, and what mode do you want to play in, Sylvia?
C Mixolydian.
Okay,
and could I...
C Mixolydian it is.
I'm a little bit
We're a little scrunchy here. Here, I'll scoot over, and then you stand right there, and we should be fine.
Nobody can see. They can't see the scroll on my Rebek.
Oh, there we are.
They can't see my scroll.
That's okay. They don't need to see your scroll. Okay.
So will you let the
Yep, perfect. There we go. Okay.
Oh, beautiful. Bravo.
Sylvia might be the only 8-year-old in America playing Rebek, and it's all thanks to your Seattle program.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, we really enjoyed that.
Set your Rebek down and come get my Rebek. And so, like I said, the Rebek flourished till about, the Renaissance violin is next, please. The Rebek flourished till about 1550, but the violin was invented in about 1490, the violin family of instruments. And it was really invented to replace woodwind consorts because you had families of wind instruments, shawms, recorders, crumhorns, what have you, that were, sort of replicating the human voice, right? The soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and all of that. Oh, here, you can bring it to me. And then when Isabel d'Este, for her court, she thought, well, woodwind instruments wouldn't quite be appropriate because of both their military and phallic associations. So she commissioned one of the great luthiers from Italy to come up with an alternative. basically the rebecks and the viols had played together, but they didn't exist in the full range of sizes and so on. So the violins then came as a match set. And this is a Renaissance violin, which I would often play in violin bands. Oh, I won't need that one for just a sec. Yeah. But this one would be played on the arm like a rebec, and it wasn't that they were too dumb to figure out that it was easier to play it here. Yeah, it's harder for the left hand when you're kind of supporting the weight of the instrument. You can't shift around as readily, but you didn't need to shift for this repertoire. And actually, for the kind of dance music they were playing, it has a different sound, which I'll show you when I get to the next instrument. But you can also, of course, use this type of playing posture even into the 1600s for English divisions playing. And this particular Renaissance violin is, of course, a modern-made replica by Jason Visseltier, made in the 1990s for the foremost player of the Renaissance violin, David Douglas. And he just passed it on to me literally a few days ago. I've performed on it many times. I actually made an entire album on it, my English Fancy album with Trio Settecento. But David is getting close to retiring, though he'll still be involved with, Newberry Consort and all of that. And so, yeah, so I'm the next caretaker of this beautiful instrument, which is so awesome.
How nice.
And Sylvia has been learning Renaissance music from Seattle Historical Arts for Kids on recorder. And so we're looking forward to playing lots of Bycinia for those early music people on listening in who know what that is. Two-part music with interchangeable instruments. So she'll be playing recorder and I'll be playing the Renaissance violin for those duets.
Oh, that's great.
Now we're switching to the Baroque violin. And this is an antique. This is a Nicola Galliano made in 1770, which would have been at the very end of violins being made in the old way. It is a very unusual instrument because it retains its original neck, most of its original varnish. So it's never been modernized. Oh, I'm not going to need that for a little while, babe. And actually, you're going to need to do something. So put that one back down. So this Galliano has been in my life since 2001. And I'm going to show you a couple of different bows. I was using a divisions bow on the Renaissance fiddle. I would actually probably use the U-wood bow if I was playing violin band music on the Renaissance violin. Now I have a Baroque bow, but more of a 17th century style that I would use for Marini, Castello, stuff like that. You can hear it has a very direct kind of sound, which makes it more understandable why the violin was considered to be somewhat interchangeable with the cornetto. Oh gosh, it's like this early brass instrument covered in black leather and shaped like a boomerang. I love the cornetto. But yeah, so listen to this one compared to my 18th century style Baroque bow. So here's the 17th century again. And then here is the 18th. Very different sound. And what's interesting is the violin actually has a different tone, even with the exact same equipment. There was an article that came out not too long ago that definitively proved that Corelli didn't play on the shoulder, didn't play all the way down on the arm like the Renaissance violin, but probably somewhere around here. And so I started fooling around with it. First I was like, oh man, now the double stops are even harder, but it really did transform my interpretation, which is why you do these things. And I'll just play an arpeggio so you can hear how the violin itself, with the same exact bow, sounds different in the different places. And now down here. So holding it here and just even the timing of how it would physically feel to do certain phrasing, but especially the tone production, really gave me all these new ideas about the Corelli sonatas that I've been playing for decades and decades. And so, yeah, now I play Corelli down here, and of course Bach and all that other stuff up on the shoulder. And another early music instrument that we have on hand is my daughter herself, because we have the human voice.
The oldest one.
Yeah, that's right. The oldest instrument in existence. And why don't you get on the other side of me again? We've both been singing lately for our species counterpoint class, but we won't subject you to any of that. But this is a Baroque singing class that she recently took, and she actually got to do, by total coincidence, one of my all-time favorite arias. So we're just going to sing you the outer, or I'm going to play, but she's going to sing the outer section of that aria.
Oh, that was lovely. Thank you so much.
Now, of course,
Beautiful.
violin is Sylvia's primary instrument, and she actually has a small Baroque violin. But if you want to see us playing those together, you can find them on YouTube.
Great.
So, moving along, if you could hand me the viola d'amore, please, son. So this instrument is a viola d'amore, which is, I should back up and say that the, you know what, stand up, hold on, I need to hand you these bows, and then get that bow, because the viola d'amore needs a stiffer bow, because it has a wider range of strings. There we go. And stick around, because I'm going to hand you the violin in a sec. So the viola d'amore, the violin family was invented, as I said, in around the 1490s, and at the same time, the viola da gamba family of instruments was invented. Nobody around here plays viola da gamba because, well, that just too much to deal with on an airplane. But those two sets of instruments, you know, were friends, and I won't go into the whole thing, but basically the violas da gamba had 6 strings. They were a fretted instrument, really came more from the lute family, so totally different etymology. So anybody who tells you that the bass viol is the ancestor of the cello just is being confused by the fact that both are played on the leg, but that has nothing to do with anything. The viola d'amore was invented around the middle of the 1600s in the Germanic area, and it has characteristics of both a violin and a viol. It has the sloped shoulders and flat back of a viola da gamba, and it's played on the shoulder like a violin. It doesn't have a family, it's just a single instrument. And what's really cool is that, like I said, I got this Baroque violin in 2001 from Charles Beer's shop in London. I've been looking for a long time for an intact, real Baroque violin, though some would say it's more authentic to get a modern-made one, because they would have been modern-made back in the Baroque, but playing on a Guarneri del Gesù as my modern violin, I wanted an antique Baroque violin, so finally found this one. And then 10 years later, at the Chorizo auction in New York, this one was up for sale. It had been actually on display just as a wall hanging in the Menig shop, and it was the liquidation of the Menig collection. This instrument had actually been in Bill Monacle's treatise on called Shapes of the Baroque. He had featured this instrument. So very special d'amore, also made by Galliano. And the gut strings had not been changed since the 1970s, and here it was 2011, and I was deciding whether to buy it. Well, I couldn't draw the bow across the strings and hear what it sounded like, but I took a chance. I was like, it's in great health, it's by a great maker, it's got to sound good, it's by the same maker as my violin, so that's kind of cool, so I guess I'll just buy it on faith. And I got it home, and my luthier took one look at the two instruments, and he goes, oh my gosh, the tops are made from the same tree.
Wow.
So this was an unbelievable destiny that they would be reunited. And
oh my goodness.
Here, you can take the violin now, babe. And now you are all done, so you can go find Dad. So this, so the viola d'amores, unlike the viola da gamba family, which mostly remains an early music instrument, viola d'amore has kind of transitioned into the modern era. And a lot of its repertoire comes from the 20th and 21st centuries. It can play, big vibrato-y things. In fact, I actually have a modern viola d'amore that, ironically, I use when I'm playing Vivaldi concertos with modern orchestras. So I use a Baroque bow. And but I've also played Stamets and things on it and later stuff. But the Baroque, so a lot of violas d'amore got re-necked, just like violins, that whole entire gender change operation. They took off the top, rearranged their innards, put on a longer, stronger fingerboard, metal strings, chopped off their neck, put on a longer, thinner neck at a steeper angle, basically to make them louder. And louder doesn't mean better, it only means louder. So this instrument, just like my violin, is not only by Galliano, but also in completely original condition, never been altered. The viola d'amore is tuned always to a chord, and many, many different chords in the Baroque era. The most common was the D tuning, and now in the modern era, even though it's played on, in any key you want, or no key at all if it's atonal music, the D tuning is what it lives in. But for the early music instruments, of course, you can get any gauge of gut you want and play any of the old tunings. So I have it in D right now just to demonstrate it. So it goes as high as a violin and as low as a viola. If you had a seventh string, which they often do, it would go lower than a viola. It has an equal number of resonating strings sitting under the playing strings to give it some kind of reverb, which sounds very silvery, and it's just a beautiful. And this is, the viola d'amore is one of the instruments that I was going to use in the concerts that sadly had to be canceled with the Seattle Baroque Orchestra that will hopefully be rescheduled sometime when the whole thing is over. And what's really fun is I made an album of the complete concertos by Vivaldi for viola d'amore, all 8 of them. And I thought it was one of my more obscure and indulgent projects, done for my own artistic satisfaction and that of a select number of connoisseurs who might enjoy such things, but not one of my mainstream, popularly appealing records, shall we say. But ironically, this viola d'amore album became my first and thus far only record to have made it onto a major Hollywood soundtrack.
Wow.
That movie that won all the Oscars a couple years ago, The Favorite.
Okay.
And if in both the movie, and if you don't want to bother to see the movie, you can actually go to the trailer too. And in the trailer, you hear this blast of this awesome, A minor music. And that is me and this instrument jamming away.
Wow. That's
so
wonderful.
The viola d'amore goes Hollywood.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So those are my early music instruments. Well, except for my little pochette. I have a little, and it's just a cheap Chinese knockoff, but I have a little, Dancing Master's fiddle, which is the one with the teeny tiny violin body and the grown-up size neck that people would use as a traveling violin and when teaching dancing lessons. And I use it actually for Scottish fiddling, since that's what the fiddlers would have been practicing on as they tramped from gig to gig. So it gives you some insights into Strauss bowing and stuff.
Oh, wow.
bridge decided to fall down this morning, and I need to fix it up. So, but I don't like perform on the pochette. It's just there for an interesting educational tool and fun toy.
Wow, that's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of those with us.
Absolutely.
So speaking of the concert you're supposed to come do this past April, so now instead you're offering a virtual concert called American Traditions that is going to be presented by us and the Placidus Artist Series and Chamber Music Tulsa on Sunday, September 13th. So I'm curious, what are the key differences that you notice as far as the dynamics of engagement with the audience in a virtual concert versus a live concert, and when it comes to you musically as an artist?
You know, that's a great question. I always try to be a positive person and, you know, look at the bright side of things. And so there's a lot of silver linings to what we're discovering now. I mean, the circumstances obviously are tragic, but there's a lot of, you know, interesting things to come out of this that I hope we'll actually retain when we go back to in-person concerts. First of all of this streaming stuff, it's really kind of cool that people from anywhere on the planet can all watch the same concert. And so I could totally envision live concerts having a streaming component, or, you know, just being streamed straight, or maybe having the artist pop backstage and do a little Q&A, or, you know, have those things. But for people to be able to watch, you know, not only if I don't happen to be going to that city or country this season, you can still catch my concert, catch it live, which is a different feeling than just watching a YouTube video. It really is. And then also, you know, for people who maybe are, you know, too young and wiggly to sit in a concert yet, or too old and frail to go out to a concert, or just homebound for whatever reason, that they can still attend performances. And I think that's a beautiful thing that I hope that, you know, we talk about going back to normal, but I hope we'll go back to all the good stuff of what things used to be, plus all of the great new stuff that we've added. I did make a socially distanced kind of a reference recording a few weeks ago for my foundation's Music by Black Composers Violin Volume 2, which is about to be released. And so it was just in this 600-seat hall. It was my pianist and me on stage with masks on, and then the engineer in the back room, and that was it. And I thought that the thing that was going to grab me the most was playing with another grown-up musician for the first time in months. You know, not just some kind of layered video or, you know, improv over Zoom, but like in the same room, breathing the music together. But, you know, I've been playing so many duets with my daughter, which has been such a nice luxury these days. And so it was awesome to play with my pianist, but it wasn't as like, you know, something I'd been missing as I thought it might have been. What ended up actually grabbing me the most unexpectedly was hearing the sound of my violin in a live acoustic space. My living room is very nice, and in fact, when we purchased our condo, we did a sound check in every living room of every condo that we surveyed, much to my real estate agent's annoyance. But like, okay, it looks nice, but what does it sound like? And so you know, as far as living rooms go, I'm very happy with mine. And my husband is a tech guy, so he's got all these different mics and everything to make the streamed sound as good as possible for the listener. But there is nothing like hearing yourself, and of course hearing the performers in a live acoustic space, and also the energy that you get from the audience that, you know, kind of feeds back in this feedback loop where you get inspired and do things that you maybe never even planned to do, but it becomes this spontaneous inspiration that you're getting literally from the crowd that's in the same space experiencing it with you. I think as we've gotten more used to doing things online, we've started to almost feel a little bit of that somehow through the internet, and definitely feel like this is the moment. One thing I don't like doing is doing like pre-made videos where I'm doing a non-live concert, because then I don't feel like now is the moment. I know that, oh, I could always do it again and fix it, which, you know, paradoxically causes me to not quite play it as well the first time. But when it's live, and then, you know, you get dressed up and then there you are. So
right.
Yeah, I mean, I love the interactivity of things right now, and also from a teaching perspective, it's been just a beautiful thing that I've been able to be a guest artist at a number of summer music festivals going on recently that the summer music festival, either because of my schedule or the distance to travel to it or because of their budget, I would have probably never gone there in person. And if they'd been holding it in person, they wouldn't have been Zooming someone in. But because it's online, I've been able to interact with a lot of young people and I mean, I did a Baroque bowing seminar for the National Orchestra Institute, for example, and just stuff that's been so rewarding. And again, I hope that as we go back to post-pandemic life, that we'll be able to retain the best of both worlds and have virtual things and in-person things, whatever is going to most enhance the students' educational experience, and be able to just go either way at whatever moment works.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you talk a little bit about the Concert American Traditions you're going to be performing in September?
Yeah, and in fact, let me get this D'Amore out of my hands, because that's
great.
That would be entirely misleading. So
You can't have that.
my modern violin, ironically, my modern violin was made earlier than my Baroque violin. My Baroque violin, as I said, was at the very end of Baroque violin, 1770, and then this modern violin by Guarneri del Gesù, of course, did start life, as all Stradivarius and Guarneris did, as a Baroque violin in 1742, but it had its operation, long ago, probably late 1800s, when they were all undergoing the knife. Well, I guess they know. Pardon me. They started undergoing the knife in the late 1700s. Yeah, but this one, I think it was early 1800s, mid 1800s. I'm trying to remember. Anyway, it's been a modern violin for longer than it ever was a Baroque violin. And instrument like this, even Bill Monacle said he wouldn't want to Baroque it back because it just works so well for Brahms concerto and stuff like that. But anyway, what I'll be doing, and I will be starting the concert with my Baroque violin and then switching to my modern violin, which I often don't get to do in person because you can only carry so many fiddles onto an airplane safely. So that's another little luxury there. But I'll be basically, I've designed the program to explore the roots of what we consider to be our American music. There are essentially two parents. One was the fiddling of the British Isles, which was mostly Scottish fiddling, actually. And then the other route would have been the music of African Americans. I've gotten to actually be in Ghana and play an instrument, another arm-held instrument called the goje, different kinds of these instruments all throughout the different countries and regions of Africa, but West Africa in particular, but an instrument played with a bow, a stringed instrument. And so then when African Americans were in this country, they would play their own music on the European violin. And that music, of course, became the blues and melded with the European fiddling to ultimately become this uniquely American fiddle style. And so I'm going to play some pieces by African American composers inspired by the blues. I'm going to start with some European dance music, some Bach, and some Scottish fiddling, and ultimately bring it all together. So it's a really fun program, and it's going to be even more fun that I get to use the actual 18th century instrument and then ultimately end up with this guy.
Oh, lovely. Well, we're going to look forward to that. Are you willing to give us a little bit of a sampling of what people might hear when they tune into that concert on the 13th?
Absolutely. So I'm going to play a little piece for you. It's one of my all-time favorites, actually, by an African-American composer named Coleridge Taylor Perkinson. He was named after the great Afro-English composer Samuel Coleridge Taylor, who was a big inspiration to classical musicians over here, Black classical musicians who were often excluded from mainstream concert life, as were women in those days. And so he was a hero to many, many people, and his mother named him after Samuel Coleridge Taylor. So his first name was Coleridge-Taylor, which is quite a mouthful of a first name. So his last name being Perkinson, he often went by Perk with his friends. And I was very lucky to know him at the end of his life, which he spent in Chicago as music director of the Center for Black Music Research's performing arm, the New Black Music Repertory Ensemble, and I got to work on his music with him. And it's just, there's something very addictive about his music. Every piece I hear of his, I just absolutely love and want to sort of play that track over and over again. This particular piece is called Louisiana Blues Strut. I'm going to actually take this earbud out for just a sec. Be a little more comfortable as I play.
Okay. Wow. Oh my goodness. That is so many textures and color. That's really powerful.
Absolutely. So I guess the last time I performed for you guys was in was it Nordstrom Theater over at Benny
Uh-huh.
Hall, doing the complete 6 Bach sonatas and partitas in a single evening on my Baroque
Right.
violin. And for an encore that night, I did a little bit of Scottish fiddling, a little medley of dance tunes from the same era as Bach. And, you know, this Scottish music is just so appealing. It was a little uncanny after the concert, you know, and I just played 6 entire Bach sonatas and partitas, all the fugues, the chaconne, the whole 9 yards. And all anybody would say to me was, wow, I just loved your encore. I was like, at first I was like, didn't you like my Bach? But then I realized, well, you know, Scottish fiddling is just such good stuff. What are you going to do? You know? So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So does that mean you're going to play a little bit of it for us?
well, I probably should. And longer Baroque bow. If you can figure out which one that is. Yep, you got it? Okay. So, oh, we should do a duet, but no time for that now. I'll just do it by myself. Okay. Okay, so I'll just do, um, I'll do a strathspey and a reel.
Woo! Wow, that makes me want to get up and dance. That's hard to say too.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. So
Sure. That's just a little bit of the medley that I'll actually be doing for the real kind.
yeah, well, that's lovely. So we do have a few minutes left for some questions if you're ready to take those, unless there's something else you'd like to share.
Sure, sounds good.
Okay, let me see kind of what we have here, if anybody asked any questions. So if anybody has any questions out there, now is the time to go ahead and ask, and I will be monitoring the Q&A box if you'd like to ask questions. So I'm just watching for some right now. So while we're kind of waiting for those to come in, what are some other projects that you're working on currently?
Yeah, so obviously spending a lot of quality time with my daughter now I mean, she always tours with me. She's been touring with me since she was 3 weeks old, but now I have, a much more flexible schedule than ever before, and so greater quantity of time for her, and that's been really wonderful to get to do a lot of different stuff. And then for myself, I've been keeping busy with, sort of a steady stream of different performances and things like that, but also the work of my foundation. We were founded in 2001, and wait, is that right? 2000? Oh, yeah, 2001. So almost 20 years ago, and we're started for the purpose of young artist support with an instrument loan program and financial assistance for young artists. But I had made an album in '97 of some music that I had researched that I just thought was really beautiful and had been under-recorded. Works by composers of African descent from the 1700s and 1800s, so basically the classical and romantic eras. And I say composers of African descent because they were actually Afro-Caribbean and Afro-European, because no Americans of any kind were writing concertos in the 1700s yet.
Right.
So this album came out in '97, and it was really life-changing because, like I said, I recorded this music because I thought it was just great music, and I wasn't quite well known enough yet to record the most famous concertos. So, and that happened obviously a few years later. I started recording Beethoven and Mendelssohn and all those ones. But I also love, finding music that's been overlooked.
Mhm.
And so I just, yeah, so naively perhaps wasn't thinking of the social justice aspect of this. I just liked the music. And then after it came out, I started getting asked to sit on diversity panels, and I started getting requests from students and parents and teachers for more of this music. And I realized that there was a real need out there, that research geeks like me will read these academic journals and know a lot of information, but that the average kid in the average town, going to their local music school, like, they don't have access to this data. They don't have access to this music, because a lot of music by Black composers, for reasons of historic discrimination, is long since out of print or has never been published and is in manuscript only. So it's difficult to just know what exists and how to find it and get a playable version. So since I already had a not-for-profit, my foundation decided to embark upon our Music by Black Composers initiative. And so we've been doing this for nearly 20 years. We've collected more than 900 pieces by more than 350 composers. We have just a whole bunch of different resources on our musicbyblackcomposers.org website, from bibliography, discography, children's book list, directory of living composers, historic composers. And we've published our first curricular materials, our first volume for violin, which includes music from 4 centuries and 5 continents, men and women, our coloring book of the 40 most important Black composers from throughout history, our timeline poster showing about 300 composers, which just really gives you an amazing visual of the breadth and depth of what's been going on all this time. And it's basically the primary goal is to inspire and encourage African American students by reacquainting them with this history, that this is not somebody else's music, and that hopefully by knowing that they've been part of classical music all along, it will make it that much more likely that they'll be part of classical music's future. But also, making sure that this repertoire is available to all young people growing up. Like my daughter, she loves the music because it's great pieces, and
Right.
she's going to grow up to not accept having a narrower slice of humanity represented in the concerts that she attends and performs, because she's had this diversity during her student years. And so that's one of the other hopes for our materials, is that it'll just get mixed in with the next generation coming up.
Wow.
Normalize things. And so we don't not only have the music itself, but we have a biography of each composer along with a visual image. And that's been a trip, trying to find a painting or a photograph. And then if it's a photograph from the early 1900s that's not quite in public domain, then you have to track down the descendants of the obscure photographer of the obscure composer. And it's like running back and forth to the Library of Congress all the time. Lots of work. And of course, gathering the music from all different countries and everything from, spending the day at the British Library to get a Cuban piece from the mid-1800s, to, going through a box of unfiled manuscripts from a composer's grandniece's attic. It's just being an archaeologist or a detective or something. So our books have the music, but also history articles, like about the all-Black orchestras of the 1800s, or the fact that Frederick Douglass and Coretta Scott King played the violin, and also role model profiles, because a lot of kids are growing up in a town that maybe does, that town's professional orchestra doesn't have a single person in it that looks like them, or there are no music teachers in that town at the school or at the music school that look like them. And so they might not really clearly see a future for themselves. And so in the pages of our book, we profile people who've gone into a number of different careers, everything from, Suzuki teacher, soloist, string quartet player, Broadway pit performer, youth orchestra conductor, professor. We're definitely hoping to profile, I think there's at least one Black violinist in Europe who also plays Baroque violin. And yeah, just showing all the different things you can grow up to do. And here's somebody giving you advice and telling you about their journey. So yeah. That's just been, and it's so interesting, because we've been working on this for all these years, because as you know, research takes a lot of time from start to finish. And then all of a sudden, with this moment where we've become so much more conscious of things that have problems in our society that have been here, but now we're just now finally noticing them as much as we should. everybody's suddenly wanting to have this music. And, thank goodness we started this work all those years ago, because now we actually can say, okay, yes, here's where you can go, here's what you can do. And
Absolutely.
yeah, really exciting to be a part of that. So, everybody's talking about binging on Netflix and baking and whatever else you're supposed to do during. And I'm like, I don't have time for that stuff. I have like lots more research to do, practicing with my daughter to do. It's
Oh,
yeah.
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. You're so engaged. So we have a lot of questions that have come in.
Good.
We've been talking. So Nancy asked, can you talk about the intersection between your classical music making and your heavy metal music making? Interact.
See, I didn't show you my entire instrument collection because I have a 6-string flying V electric violin, so going off in the other direction, past the modern violin. See, every time they alter the violin, they get louder. But louder doesn't mean better, right? You
Right.
lose volume and you lose subtlety. But anyways, yeah, my really loud violin. And, well, basically, it's interesting because, first of all, a lot of great rock guitarists have studied classical music to get their chops going. And, both like Bach, Paganini, and then, of course, a lot of the great metal bands have been inspired by the drama and epic nature of like Romantic era bombastic symphonic works and things like that. So there's definitely an influence that way. And then just recently, there have been a few composers of classical music who love heavy metal like I do, who've started to write some works for me inspired by metal, and some symphonic works and things like that. And just like Bartok with the Hungarian folk music in the 20th century, or all the composers incorporating elements of jazz, there's now a small but growing body of classical repertoire with various types of rhythmic elements, melodic elements, and tonal elements inspired by various heavy metal genres. I played in a metal band for 6 years, which was a cross between doom metal and thrash metal, as I mentioned earlier, called Earthen Grave. If you want to look, our album is on Spotify and stuff. Unfortunately,
Wonderful.
none of our best live performances are on YouTube, sadly. One day we'll have to see if we can dig up some footage. And we have some of our first attempts at being a band are on there, we sound much better a year later. But anyways, I'm really, really proud of our album. And it was so interesting to be part of a songwriting collective, because normally a classical composer will sit down and write the piece, right? All the parts, all the sections, the whole thing. And being in a band, one person would write a riff and another person would say, oh, here's a riff I thought of that would go well with this riff. And then somebody else would add their part, and maybe somebody else would say, oh, maybe this one should be 3 times, but then we need a transition before we go to that thing. And, and so it's like a whole bunch of cooks, mixing it all up. And, really fascinating to be part of that process. Almost like improv, something halfway between composing and improv in a way. And of course, you do improv when you have some of the shreddy solos over a set of chord changes you get to do.
Sure.
But then also the live performance of in front of a rock audience is different than classical performance because of the nature of the engagement from the audience, that they're not supposed to sit still and be quiet.
Right.
So it's like what I described it as real-time feedback. If they liked what I was doing, they would come closer to the stage and they would yell louder and throw the horns more vigorously. And, I could tell if I was reaching them. Conversely, if I wasn't reaching them, they were just standing there okay, whatever. Then I would be okay, what can I do better? So I was always analyzing, what am I doing right? What could I be doing better? And trying to adjust in that moment. When you're playing a classical concert, of course you can feel the audience. But you don't know 100% for sure till you get to the last note, and then they either clap politely or they clap enthusiastically, and then for sure. But I feel like even though it's such a different type of emotional palette and type of energy to be playing with an actual heavy metal band, I feel like I became a better performer for all of the music that I perform in terms of audience communication, because of that opportunity to have that real-time feedback in those rock scenarios. So I'll always be grateful for that. Our band did not break up. We disbanded because the one guitarist moved to Texas, and we could have replaced him as a guitarist, but not as a songwriter. It would have been a totally new DNA. And then our bass player's other band really took off and started touring in Europe. And then my daughter started needing me to practice with her more hours a day. And so we just kind of shook hands and we literally disbanded. But
Right,
yeah,
right.
maybe one day we'll have the reunion tour. Maybe by that.
Oh, we'll have to watch for that.
And of course, my daughter does have an electric violin herself, so she joins in on
Oh, wow. That's great. So Susan writes, as my daughter who is 12, who has gone to bed, wanted to know how long it takes to become a professional violinist. And I told her I'd try to find out.
Wow, that's a really interesting question. Basically, one thing that I like to tell young people is don't worry about what age you do anything. Because it's like when you think about babies, parents get really stressed about these things sometimes. Like one baby learns to crawl at age 6 months and the other baby doesn't crawl until they're 9 months. Oh no. But actually, it might be the second baby who becomes the Olympic sprinter. Like the fact that the first baby crawled first doesn't mean that it's going to be a better baby later on or better athlete or whatever. So the same thing with your music making. There might be a kid younger than you that's playing a piece that's harder than you, and you think, oh no, I'm behind or something like that. And that's totally not true, because ultimately, first of all, progress doesn't just go in a straight line. You might, have plateaus and shoot up, and it's kind of more of a zigzag. And also, what really matters is, when you're 30 years old and you walk out on stage, do you have something meaningful to say about the music? Because the audience isn't going to know or care if you first learned that piece at age 18 or you first learned that piece at age 10. It really doesn't matter. All that matters is, can you do a performance of it now as a grown-up? That really moves me. And so becoming professional, well, there's lots of different things you can do in the profession. I mean, I started playing, wedding gigs for pay when I was 14, and it was a heck of a lot better than babysitting. So that was pretty awesome. You can start to earn money with your instrument, as soon as you get to a certain level, whenever that might be. And then you can get better jobs, and always trying to balance things that earn you money versus things that bring you satisfaction. And you might even end up not doing music for the thing that earns you money, but doing amazing artistic stuff that that's your passion. These days, it used to be that parents wanted you to get that one tenured position in the section of a symphony orchestra because there was security. But if you look at it from a different perspective, what if something happened to that one orchestra? Then you would have no job. And so just like you would never put all of your money into one single stock, diversifying your musical activities is actually more secure, even if it doesn't quite seem like it at first blush. And it's starting to be referred to in the conservatory realm as the portfolio career, playing again on diversifying your stocks and bonds and whatever investments. And so you might do some teaching, you might play in some orchestras, have some chamber groups, early music ensembles, new music ensembles, just doing a whole bunch of different stuff, some of which earns you more money than others, some of which brings you more satisfaction than others, and all put together, it's a full and rich musical life. And as a young person, you can start doing some of that in a gradual progression. It isn't like other kinds of professions where you're a student, and now you have a job and you're a professional. With music, you can be a young person and start teaching an even younger kid, helping out, giving some supplemental lessons to one of your students' other teachers that needs a practicing buddy. You can start to play a few gigs here and there and sort of ease your way into the professional world. So first you're doing about 10% of your activity is earning money, and then maybe 50, and then finally you get yourself to the point where you're earning your whole living playing music. Maybe you're no longer really taking lessons, and now you can get an apartment and be an official grown-up.
Right. So Jillian asks, what are modern gut strings like? Are there any special tricks to putting them on and maintaining?
Well, actually, if you go to my old podcast called Violin Adventures, I don't know if it's on Spotify. I should look and see if it's on the most recent. I know it used to be on like iTunes. And of course, it's on the internet. So you just Google Rachel Barton Pine Violin Adventures podcast, and there it is. It's free, of course. I have an entire episode with one of the country's best makers of gut strings, Dan Larson from Gamut Music. And I've got all my instruments strung with Larson strings over here. And basically, he talks a lot about how he and other gut string makers have researched, the old techniques and built upon them. And it's very strange because I'm actually a vegan, but there is no synthetic that sounds quite like the real intestines of sheep and cattle. So what are you going to do? And the strings are more finicky. They break more often. They squeak when the weather changes, and then you're going, oh, there's a reason they stopped using these things. There's a particular kinds of tone colors that they have that for certain kinds of music, putting metal on your instrument is just not going to get you there. And so it's totally worth it. And, I think everybody who plays gut strings has a love-hate relationship with them. But luckily, my husband will sometimes be very chivalrous and knot the knots before I put the things in the... So every once in a while I get help with my knots, which is the least enjoyable part of the whole operation.
Right. Well, we are at about time right now. We do have a few more questions, but you have graciously offered to make a short video answering any remaining questions that we have. So that will be lovely, and we will make that available to people who haven't had their questions answered tonight.
Oh.
Just ran out of time because we just got into such lively conversation, which has been just delightful, Rachel. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we'll look forward to seeing you again on Sunday, September 13th at 6 o'clock for your American Traditions concert. And yeah, we'll be letting people very shortly know how to register for that through our newsletter and also through our website. So just watch for that. We'd love to have you join us. And so just thank you so much, Rachel. And take good care, and we'll be seeing you soon. And for everybody who's joined us, thank you so much, and have a very, very pleasant evening. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for having me. See you soon.
Absolutely.